4 true, scary, middle-of-nowhere horror stories from Reddit. Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, I tell horror stories, the kind that are submitted by real people, real experiences, things that happen to ordinary folks in places where nobody could hear them scream. Tonight, we're going deep. Out past the highway exits, past the last gas station, past the cell towers and the streetlights and every single sign of civilization you've ever taken for granted. Get comfortable. Turn the lights on if you need to, and whatever you do, don't go outside alone tonight. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Rest Stop on Route 9. I've been driving trucks for about 11 years. Long haul, cross-country, you name it, I've done it. I've seen deer standing frozen in the road at 3 a.m. I've driven through blizzards where I literally couldn't see 5 feet ahead of me, and I pulled over in some of the sketchiest rest stops in the country. I thought I'd seen everything the road could throw at me. I hadn't. This happened about 4 years ago, somewhere in rural New Mexico. I was hauling a load of industrial equipment from Phoenix to Albuquerque, and I'd gotten a late start because of a mechanical delay at the loading dock. By the time I hit the stretch of highway between nowhere and nothing, it was just past 2 in the morning. My eyes were starting to feel that heavy, burning ache that every driver knows, the kind that tells you that you've got maybe 20 minutes before you're a danger to yourself and everyone else on the road. I needed to stop. I hadn't passed an exit with a real rest area in about 40 miles, so when my headlights caught the faded green sign that said, "Rest Area 1 mile," I exhaled with relief. I didn't even think twice about it. I just drove. The rest stop was small, like almost suspiciously small. One concrete building that held the bathrooms, a couple of picnic tables, some dead weeds poking up through cracked pavement, and a single overhead light that buzzed and flickered like it was on its last breath. There were no other trucks parked there, no cars, nothing. Just me. I told myself that was fine. I wasn't there to socialize. I parked the rig, cracked my windows, and reclined my seat. I set an alarm for 45 minutes. I closed my eyes. I was almost asleep when I heard it. A knock on my driver's side door. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, like whoever was doing it was being careful not to spook me. I sat up fast. My heart was immediately hammering. I looked out the window, and there was a man standing next to my truck. He was older, maybe mid-60s, wearing a dirty flannel shirt and jeans. He had a gray beard and sunken eyes, and he was smiling up at me like we were old friends. I cracked the window maybe 2 inches. "Hey, sorry to bother you," he said. His voice was friendly, almost too friendly. "My car broke down about a mile back. Just wondering if you could give me a ride to the next town, or maybe let me use your phone." I looked around. I hadn't passed any broken down cars on the way in, and there was only one road in and out of this rest stop. "Where's your car?" I asked. He pointed vaguely behind him. "Just back down the road a bit. Couldn't see it from here." "How'd you get here?" He smiled again. "Walked." Something about that smile made my skin crawl. It didn't move right, like it was something he was doing on purpose rather than something he actually felt. "I don't carry passengers. Company policy." "Oh, that's all right," he said. He didn't move. "Could I just borrow your phone? Just for a second?" I told him my phone was dead. He just nodded slowly, still smiling, still standing right there. "Okay," he said. "Okay, that's all right." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the flickering light. I watched him go until I couldn't see him anymore. I sat there for about 30 seconds, telling myself to calm down, telling myself he was just some unlucky guy with a broken-down car, but something deep in my gut wouldn't let it go. Something felt wrong about the whole thing, the way he smiled, the way he hadn't seemed even a little bit frustrated or worried for someone stranded in the middle of the desert at 2 in the morning. I decided to leave. I started the truck up, pulled forward towards the exit, and my headlights swept across the picnic area. He was sitting at one of the picnic tables.
He wasn't facing the road, he wasn't looking at his phone or doing anything. He was just sitting there, perfectly still, facing the concrete bathroom building. I drove out of there and didn't stop again until I hit a truck stop with 40 other trucks and a 24-hour diner full of people. I didn't sleep that night. Here's the part that I think about even now. When I told this story to another driver at the truck stop that morning, an older guy who'd been running that stretch of highway for 20 years, he looked at me and got very quiet. He told me that rest stop had been closed for 3 years. Budget cuts. The state had shut it down, locked the bathrooms, and officially decommissioned it. The lights hadn't worked in years, he said. But I'd seen them flickering. I'd parked under one. I'd seen that man's face clear as day in that yellow light. I pulled up the rest stop on my GPS when I got back to my truck. He was right. The GPS showed it as permanently closed. No services. I've driven that route 6 more times since then, and I've never been able to find the exit again.
Story 2. Don't stop for anyone. My girlfriend, I'll call her Becca, and I took a road trip 2 summers ago. We were driving from Tennessee to Colorado for a camping trip, taking the scenic back roads because neither of us was in a rush and we both liked the idea of seeing something different from the interstate. We'd been planning this trip for months. New tent, new gear, a whole playlist of road trip music that Becca had spent 2 weeks putting together. It was supposed to be one of those trips you talk about for the rest of your life. It was, just not for the reasons we planned. That was our first mistake, the backroads. The second mistake was not listening to the one person at the gas station in Amarillo who looked us dead in the eyes and said, "You don't want to go that way." We laughed it off, thought he was just one of those local characters who like to spook tourists. We thanked him, bought our drinks and snacks, and pulled back onto the road heading west. I still think about him sometimes, the way he watched our car pull out of that parking lot. He didn't wave. He didn't go back inside. He just stood there and watched us go. And when I glanced in the rearview mirror, he was still standing there, getting smaller and smaller until the road curved and he disappeared. Day 2 of the drive, somewhere in the Oklahoma Panhandle. And if you've never driven through that part of the country, let me paint you a picture. Flat. So impossibly flat that you can see for 30 miles in every direction and there is absolutely nothing. No trees, no hills, no buildings. Just dry brown earth and a 2-lane road cutting straight through the middle of it like someone drew a line with a ruler. The sky out there is enormous, in a way that feels almost threatening, like it's pressing down on you from above. The sun was sitting low and heavy that afternoon, throwing long orange shadows across the road, and the whole landscape had this amber, washed-out glow to it. It's beautiful, in a quiet, eerie kind of way. At least it was until around mile 40 of that emptiness. That's when we saw the woman. She was standing on the side of the... Story 2. Don't stop for anyone. My girlfriend, I'll call her Becca, and I took a road trip 2 summers ago. We were driving from Tennessee to Colorado for a camping trip, taking the scenic back roads because neither of us was in a rush and we both liked the idea of seeing something different from the interstate. We'd been planning this trip for months. New tent, new gear, a whole playlist of road trip music that Becca had spent 2 weeks putting together. It was supposed to be one of those trips you talk about for the rest of your life. It was, just not for the reasons we planned. That was our first mistake, the backroads. The second mistake was not listening to the one person at the gas station in Amarillo who looked us dead in the eyes and said, "You don't want to go that way." We laughed it off, thought he was just one of those local characters who like to spook tourists. We thanked him, bought our drinks and snacks, and pulled back onto the road heading west. I still think about him sometimes, the way he watched our car pull out of that parking lot. He didn't wave. He didn't go back inside. He just stood there and watched us go.
and when I glanced in the rearview mirror, he was still standing there, getting smaller and smaller until the road curved and he disappeared. Day 2 of the drive, somewhere in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and if you've never driven through that part of the country, let me paint you a picture. Flat. So impossibly flat that you can see for 30 miles in every direction, and there is absolutely nothing. No trees, no hills, no buildings. Just dry brown earth and a 2-lane road cutting straight through the middle of it like someone drew a line with a ruler. The sky out there is enormous, in a way that feels almost threatening, like it's pressing down on you from above. The sun was sitting low and heavy that afternoon, throwing long orange shadows across the road, and the whole landscape had this amber, washed-out glow to it. It's beautiful, in a quiet, eerie kind of way. At least it was until around mile 40 of that emptiness. That's when we saw the woman. She was standing on the side of the road, not walking, not hitchhiking with her thumb out, just standing there, facing the road, watching our car approach. She was wearing a long white dress, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked completely out of place in a way I can't fully describe, like a photograph that someone had cut out and pasted into the wrong background. The dress was too clean for the setting, too bright against all that dry brown dirt and dead grass. From half a mile away, she looked like a candle flame in a dark room, impossible to look away from. Becca grabbed my arm immediately. "Don't stop," she said. Her voice had that quiet, flat tone she gets when she's being completely serious. Not scared yet, just certain. Like some deep instinct in her had already processed the situation and reached a conclusion before her brain had time to catch up. I wasn't planning to stop, but as we got closer, I could see that the woman was young, early 20s maybe, and she looked terrified. Her mouth was moving, like she was saying something or maybe screaming, but I couldn't hear anything through the windows. Her eyes were wide and fixed on our car like we were the only thing she could see. There was something desperate in that look, something that pulled at me. "She looks scared," I said. "Don't stop," Becca said again. Her voice was sharper this time. I slowed down anyway. I know how that sounds. I know that half the people reading this are probably shaking their head right now, but you have to understand. From inside that car, with the sun in my eyes and the music low on the radio, she just looked like a young woman in trouble. And I couldn't shake the thought that if this was real, if she genuinely needed help, and I just blew past her doing 70 miles an hour in the middle of absolute nowhere, then whatever happened to her next was partly on me. I pulled over about 30 feet past her and rolled down my window. She didn't move toward the car. She was still standing in the exact same spot, but now she was looking directly at me. Her expression hadn't changed, that wide-eyed, terrified look. But she wasn't running to us. She wasn't walking or calling out or doing any of the things you'd expect from someone who'd just seen help arrive. She wasn't doing anything at all. She was just staring. "Hey," I called out. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Nothing. "Do you need a phone? Are you hurt?" Still nothing. She just stared, and the longer she stared, the more wrong it felt. Because her expression said she was scared, but her body said something completely different. She was too still, too calm. Not a tremor, not a shift in her weight, not even a blink that I could see from that distance. Like a statue someone had dressed up and placed at the side of the road just to see what a passing driver would do. The wind moved her hair. That was the only part of her that moved, just her hair lifting slightly in the dry desert breeze. Everything else was absolutely, completely motionless. The radio cut out. Not faded, not static, just cut. 1 second Becca's playlist was playing, and then silence. I remember noticing that and thinking it was strange. I remember the silence feeling very loud all of a sudden. Becca was gripping my arm so hard it hurt. Her nails were digging in. "Drive," she whispered. "Please, drive right now." I turned back to the windshield, and there was a man standing directly in front of our car. I don't know where he came from. There was no vehicle anywhere in sight. There was nowhere to hide out there. The land was flat and empty for miles in every direction. No ditch deep enough, no brush tall enough. He should not have been able to appear from nowhere on that road, but there he was, maybe 8 feet from my front bumper, just standing there, looking at the hood of my car. He was tall. That's the first thing I registered. Taller than he should have looked from that distance. He was wearing dark clothes, a jacket that was too heavy for the weather, and he was holding something long and dark in his right hand, hanging at his side. I couldn't tell exactly what it was in the afternoon glare, but the way he held it, easy and loose and low, the angle of it, it didn't look like a walking stick. It didn't look like anything innocent. He wasn't looking at my face through the windshield. He was looking at the car, slowly, almost lazily, like he was inspecting it. I threw the car into reverse and floored it. The tires screamed. Becca made a sound I've never heard her make before or since. I spun the wheel hard on the gravel shoulder before I got it under control. I don't really remember the next 60 seconds clearly. That whole stretch is just noise and motion in my memory. I know I spun the car around on that empty road. I know gravel sprayed up under the tires and rattled against the undercarriage. I know I got us pointed back east and pushed the accelerator down as hard as it would go. When I finally looked in the rearview mirror, both of them, the woman and the man, were just standing there, watching us. Neither of them moved, neither of them chased. The man still had that thing hanging at his side. The woman was still wearing that expression, wide-eyed and frozen. They just watched. I drove for 2 hours straight without stopping. I didn't touch the radio. Becca didn't say a word for the first 40 minutes, and when she finally did speak, all she said was, "I knew." The second I saw her, I knew something was wrong. I asked her what she felt. She shook her head slowly and said, "I don't know how to explain it." She just didn't feel like a person in trouble. She felt like a reason to stop.
That sentence has stayed with me every day since. We didn't talk much after that. There wasn't a whole lot to say. When we finally stopped at a gas station, a real one, with lights and other cars and people moving around, I got out on shaking legs and went around to pump the gas. And that's when I saw it. A long scratch running down the entire passenger side of my car, deep and deliberate, gouged into the paint from the front passenger door all the way to the back bumper in one continuous line. The kind of mark that takes effort, the kind that someone makes slowly, pressing hard, walking the full length of a vehicle. I stood there and stared at it. I hadn't heard it happen. I hadn't felt any vibration through the door panel. Becca hadn't mentioned anything brushing the car when I pulled over. Neither of us had seen anyone near the passenger side. In the few seconds between stopping and reversing and spinning around, it had happened without either of us knowing. Someone had been standing right outside Becca's window, close enough to touch the car, close enough to reach in if that window had been down. And we never saw them, not even for a second. We canceled the camping trip and drove straight back to Tennessee. Didn't stop except for gas, and every time we stopped, I walked around the car first. I've never taken a back road through that part of the country again. And every now and then, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that woman in the white dress, standing perfectly still at the side of the road, hair moving in the wind, eyes wide and fixed and empty. And I think about whoever was standing next to our car the whole time, waiting. Story 3. The Farmhouse at the End of the Road. I want to start by saying that I know I was in the wrong here. I was trespassing. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I fully accept that. But what happened to me in that farmhouse is something that doesn't fit neatly into any explanation I've been able to come up with in the 4 years since it happened, and it still wakes me up at night. I was 23 at the time, living in rural Indiana, and I was really into urban exploration. You know the hobby, going into abandoned buildings, old factories, empty houses, taking photos. I had an Instagram page and everything. I'd done maybe 30 or 40 locations by that point and never had a single serious incident. Mostly it was just empty warehouses and crumbling old schools, a few houses here and there. Nothing that ever made me feel genuinely unsafe. I thought I was experienced. I thought I had a feel for these places, for when something was actually dangerous versus when it just looked spooky. I told myself I had good instincts. That farmhouse taught me how wrong I was. I first heard about the property from a guy I'd connected with through the urban exploration community online. He'd grown up in that part of Indiana and knew the area well. He sent me a message one day with a photo attached, just an exterior shot, blurry, taken from the end of a dirt road. 2-story farmhouse, white paint gone gray with age, a dead field behind it. He wrote, "Heard you like abandoned spots. This one's been empty for 20 years and nobody goes near it. Thought you'd be interested." I messaged him back asking for the address. He gave it to me, then added one more line before signing off. He wrote, "Locals say something bad happened there. Don't know the details, just thought you should know." I filed that away and didn't think too hard about it. Every abandoned property has a story. That's half the appeal. I went on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I'd chosen a weekday deliberately, less chance of running into anyone, less chance of being seen. I told myself that was smart planning. Really, I just didn't want anyone to talk me out of it. The sky was overcast and heavy, the kind of flat gray ceiling that makes everything underneath it look washed out and a little unreal. The corn in the surrounding fields was brown and dead and rustling in a wind that shouldn't have been strong enough to move it that way. Each stalk leaning and shifting, a dry whispering sound that followed me the whole walk up the dirt road. I remember thinking the whole landscape looked like something from a painting, beautiful in the way that certain sad things are beautiful. The house itself was 2 stories, white paint peeling down to bare gray wood in long curling strips. The porch was sagging on the left side, where one of the support posts had given way, tilting the whole structure at a slight angle that made the house look like it was leaning in to hear something. All the windows were dark, not boarded up, just dark, the glass intact on most of them, reflecting the gray sky back at me. A barn off to the side with its doors hanging open, the darkness inside deep enough that I couldn't see anything past the first few feet. A rusted truck in the gravel driveway that looked like it had been sitting there for decades, the tires completely flat, the cab overgrown with weeds pushing up through the floor. I stood at the edge of the property for a good 2 or 3 minutes before I went any closer. That was unusual for me. Normally I just walk up and go in, but something about this place made me pause. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling you get before a storm, that low-pressure heaviness in the air that your body registers before your brain names it. I took some photos outside, circled the house once, looked in through the ground floor windows. Nothing but dark shapes inside. Old furniture, shadows. I checked the barn quickly, just a sweep of my flashlight across empty stalls and rotted hay bales, and something small that skittered away into the dark when the light hit it. Then I went to the front door. It wasn't locked, just stuck, swollen in its frame from years of rain and heat and cold. I put my shoulder against it, and it opened with a groan that seemed too loud in all that silence. I stepped into the front room. The smell hit me immediately. Rot, yes, the deep, damp smell of a building that had been slowly dying for 20 years, wood going soft, plaster crumbling, things growing in the walls. But underneath it, something else, something I couldn't immediately identify. Almost sweet, like fruit that had gone just past the point of ripe, hovering right at the edge of decay.
I pulled my shirt up over my nose for a second, then let it drop. I'd smelled worse in other locations. I told myself it was just the age of the place. The inside was untouched in the way that always gets to me about these places. No matter how many abandoned buildings I went into, I never got fully used to it. The way life just stops mid-sentence. There was still furniture in there. A couch against the far wall with the cushions caved in, a brown water stain spreading across the ceiling above it. A dining table with 4 chairs pushed in neatly, like the family had just finished dinner and walked out and never came back. A bookshelf with a few paperbacks still on it, their spines too faded to read. There were still pictures on the walls. That was the thing that made me slow down. Family photos, framed, hanging in a little arrangement beside the staircase. A man and a woman in what looked like the 70s based on the clothing and the quality of the print. A couple of kids, a dog, everyone smiling. I stood there and looked at those photos longer than I needed to. There was something about the normalness of them, the total, complete normalness of a family standing in front of their house smiling at a camera, and then 20 years of silence. There was a calendar in the kitchen frozen on September. The year had faded completely off the top of it, bleached by years of light coming through the window above the sink. A coffee mug still on the counter, a dish towel folded over the oven handle, stiff as cardboard now, but folded neatly, like someone had left expecting to come back. I moved through the first floor taking photos, and everything was still and quiet, except for the wind moving through a broken pane somewhere in the back of the house, a low, steady sound that rose and fell like breathing. I should have left then. Looking back, I can see it so clearly. I had everything I came for. Good photos, interesting location, a full card on my camera. There was no reason to go upstairs. But there's something that happens to you in those places when you've been doing it long enough, a kind of boldness that builds up over time, layered over every location you walked away unscathed. You start to feel like the bad things that could happen in a place like this are somehow theoretical, like they apply to other people, like you've earned a pass. I went upstairs. The stairs creaked under every single step, loud enough that I winced each time. The sound traveled in that empty house, bouncing off bare walls and low ceilings. The upper hallway was darker than the first floor, the windows smaller, set high, the overcast sky outside giving almost no light. I pulled out my flashlight and swept it ahead of me. 4 doors. 3 of them open, standing ajar at different angles. I looked into each one. Empty rooms. A bare mattress frame in one, the springs rusted. A closet hanging open in another, still holding a few wire hangers that swayed almost imperceptibly in the air current from the hallway. Dust on every surface, thick enough to write in. The kind of stillness that accumulates over decades. The 4th door was closed. I stopped in front of it, and something happened that I've tried to explain to people since and never quite managed. The moment I put my hand on that door handle, every single hair on my body stood up. Not a chill, not a shiver, something more total than that, like my entire nervous system fired at once. My hand actually froze on the door handle. I stood there for a second that felt much longer, my brain and my body in direct disagreement about what to do next. My body said walk away, leave this door exactly as it is, go back down those stairs and out through that stuck front door and back to your car and drive away from this road and this property and never come back. My brain said, it's just a door, it's just a room. You've opened 100 doors in 100 abandoned buildings. There's nothing behind it.
The room was empty, just peeling wallpaper, a faded yellow floral pattern, strips of it hanging away from the wall like dead skin, and a bare wooden floor, and a single window with a cracked pane. No furniture, nothing stacked in the corners, nothing hanging on the walls, the same thick layer of dust on the floor that had been in every other room.
Nothing alarming, nothing visibly wrong. Except the dust on the floor wasn't undisturbed. There were marks in it, scuff marks, like something had been moved around in the center of the room recently. And in the very center, on the bare wooden floor, there was a neat little pile of things. A child's sneaker, small, maybe a size 4, Velcro strap, dirty white with a faded cartoon character on the side. A single earring, small gold hoop, the kind that's so common you could find it anywhere, except you wouldn't find it here, 20 miles from the nearest town, in a room that supposedly hadn't been entered in 20 years. A man's wallet, open and laid flat with what looked like credit cards still inside and a few folded bills. A woman's watch with a broken band, the face scratched but still ticking. I remember noticing that. The second hand was still moving. Different people, different ages, different belongings, arranged together in a careful little collection, set down deliberately with space between each item, like they'd been placed there with intention. I stood there staring at it, and my brain was working very hard to find an explanation that made it okay. Kids playing a prank? Someone's lost and found dropped here for no reason? Anything. I couldn't find one that fit. Then I heard a sound from below me. Footsteps, slow and heavy, moving from the back of the house toward the base of the stairs. Measured steps, not hurried, not sneaking. The kind of steps that aren't trying to be quiet because they don't need to be. Whatever was making that sound knew I was there. I didn't think. I didn't process. My body just moved. I crossed to the window in 4 steps, looked down at the porch roof directly below, and I went through. I hit the porch roof with both feet and immediately felt it shift under me, soft and rotten, and I slipped. I went sideways off the edge and dropped into the dead grass below. The impact went straight through my left ankle, and I felt something pull that made my eyes water. I got up anyway. I ran, limping, half hobbling but running. I got to my car, got the key in the ignition with hands that were shaking badly enough that I dropped it once, and I drove down that dirt road faster than I should have in a vehicle with any regard for its suspension. I called the local police from the gas station in town, sitting in my car with the doors locked and the engine still running. I told the dispatcher everything. The house, the room, the collection of belongings on the floor. She took my information and said they'd look into it. Someone would follow up with me. Nobody ever did. No follow-up call, no news story, no local report. I searched online for weeks afterward. Nothing. The Aldrin property, the farmhouse at the end of that road, it didn't exist in any record I could find. No incident reports, no missing persons connected to it, nothing. 2 weeks after it happened, I drove back out there. I wanted to see it in daylight with clear eyes. I wanted to prove to myself that it was just an old house and I'd spooked myself and the things I'd found on that floor had a perfectly boring explanation. I couldn't find the road. The turnoff wasn't where I remembered it. I drove that entire area for over an hour back and forth on the county roads looking for the dirt track that led out to the property. It wasn't there. Not hidden, not overgrown, just gone, like it never existed. But the photos I took inside that house are still on my phone. I've looked at them hundreds of times. The front room, the kitchen, the hallway upstairs, clear photos, well lit, exactly what I remember seeing. And the last one I took, the one I snapped right before I went upstairs, doing a final sweep of the front room, shows the room I just walked through. The couch, the water stain on the ceiling, the family photos on the wall beside the staircase. And in the open doorway at the far end of the room, slightly out of focus the way things are when they're not your subject, there is the silhouette of a person, standing in the doorway, upright, still. I never saw anyone. I never heard anyone, not until those footsteps on the floor below me. But that photo doesn't lie. Someone was already in that house the moment I walked in. They were there the whole time I was on the first floor. They were there when I was standing looking at those family photos. They were there when I was in that kitchen looking at that coffee mug and that folded dish towel, thinking about the family that had left everything behind. Whatever I walked into in that farmhouse, whoever had built that collection on the floor of that room, they weren't gone. They were just waiting, patient and quiet, standing in doorways in the dark, watching a stranger wander through their space. I deleted my Instagram page the following week. I've never been inside an abandoned building since.
Story 4. Mile Marker 33. This happened 3 years ago, and I've told it exactly twice before posting it here, once to my brother and once to a therapist. The therapist suggested I was experiencing stress-induced paranoia. My brother just told me to sleep with a knife. Neither response made me feel a whole lot better. I was driving home from a work conference in Nevada, cutting back through the Arizona desert on a 2-lane highway that I'd used plenty of times before. It was just after midnight, clear sky, full moon, perfect visibility, the kind of drive that's almost meditative once you've done it a few times. About 2 hours into the drive, I noticed headlights behind me. That wasn't unusual. There were other people on the road, but these headlights were closer than I liked. I was doing about 70, which was right with the flow of traffic on that highway, and whoever was behind me was matching it exactly, perfectly, not trying to pass, not dropping back, just sitting right on my bumper in a way that felt aggressive without crossing any obvious line. I slowed down to 60. They slowed down to 60. I sped up to 80. They sped up to 80. I changed lanes. They changed lanes. My palms were sweating by now. I looked for an exit, somewhere to pull off, but out there exits could be 15 or 20 miles apart. There was nothing around me, just desert and moonlight and those headlights filling up my mirrors. I tried to get a look at the vehicle when I passed a mile marker bright enough to reflect some light back. All I could make out was that it was a dark-colored SUV. I couldn't see a driver. The windshield was just black. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm, got my location off a mile marker I read out to her, and told me to keep driving and stay on the line while she sent a patrol car. She told me not to stop under any circumstances. I don't know how long I drove like that with her on the phone. It felt like an hour, but was probably closer to 15 minutes. The whole time, those headlights never wavered, never fell back, never accelerated past me. Then, without any warning, they were gone. No turnoff, no exit, no place for a vehicle to go. I was watching my mirrors, and the headlights were there, and then they weren't. No brake lights, no turn signal, just darkness. The highway patrol found me about 8 minutes later. I was pulled over on the shoulder, shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. The officer took my statement, ran the mile markers I'd given dispatch, and then drove the stretch of road I'd described. He came back and told me there were no other vehicles on that highway for a 15-mile stretch in either direction. He was kind about it. He asked if I'd been driving a long time, if I was tired, if I'd had anything to drink. I told him I was completely sober and that I'd been on his dispatcher the entire time. He got quiet at that. He asked me what mile marker I'd first spotted the vehicle. I told him 33. He looked at me for a moment. Then he looked down at his notepad. Then he said very carefully that there had been a fatal accident at mile marker 33 about 6 months earlier, a head-on collision involving a dark SUV. The driver of the SUV had been the one who caused the accident. He died at the scene. He didn't elaborate. He didn't say what he thought it meant. He just wrote up his report, handed me a copy, and told me to drive safe. I got back on the highway. I watched my mirrors the entire rest of the way home. The road behind me was empty. It stayed empty. But about 10 miles from my house, for just 1 second, I saw a flash of headlights in my mirror. Close, too close.
And then, nothing. I don't drive that highway anymore. 4 stories, 4 different stretches of empty road, abandoned land, and open darkness. Different people, different places, but all of them with the same quiet lesson underneath. The middle of nowhere isn't really nowhere. Something is always out there, and most of the time the reason we don't know what it is because the people who found out didn't make it back to tell us. Thanks for watching. If you have your own story, you know where to find me. Drop it in the comments or send it in, and maybe next time I'll be reading yours. Until then, stay close to the lights. End card music fades in.